Hyperpop, one of the most eccentric and unique subgenres to emerge in the 21st century, taking what we know as pop and turning it on its head. On the surface, it may seem that hyperpop is a combination of alternative and pop music, but the genre and culture behind it tap into new territories of experimental sounds, themes, and recurring elements. What makes hyperpop stand out even further is its association to LGBTQ+ artists who shaped the hyperpop sound and centered queer narratives in this new sound they pioneered. Hi, my name is Kristianto, and in this episode, I will be breaking down what exactly makes a sound hyperpop. As we analyze examples of hyperpop tracks and search for commonalities, I will also be discussing how the LGBTQ+ artists who produced these tracks not only centered queer narratives in hyperpop tracks, but also queered the sound of hyperpop itself. Today we'll be taking a listen to Immaterial by Sophie, Man to Man by Dorian Electra, and Haunted by Laura Leigh. Sophie is often considered to be the pioneer of hyperpop. She sought to bring avant-garde elements into her sound and managed to irreversibly associate hyperpop with these camp elements. Her first series of singles contorted elements of giddy Euro dance, Japanese and Korean pop, and experimental sound design into blindingly neon-colored pop art gems that served as the foundation of her hyperpop style. Her music was eventually discovered by hyperpop godfather A.G. Cook, who produced her music, where she interjected a more accessible and straightforward sound. In Immaterial, Sophie invites listeners to a glittering world of potential with an electric orchestra of synths and modulated vocals. Sophie uses a unique mixture of synths and experimental beats built from the ground up. The beats Sophie creates primarily consist of what sounds like a pitched xylophone or marimba, which has a bright, piercing timbre. The heavily layered backing vocals that are modulated create a dense sound that contrasts with the electric, upbeat main vocals and beat. Auto-tuned vocals purposefully pitched to sound robotic convey the message of the song. I could be anything I want, anyhow, anywhere, anyplace, anyone that I want. To me, the texture that Sophie achieves is electric and futuristic. I feel like Sophie's musical production promises something exciting, bright, and upbeat to us. Sophie even surprises listeners in the bridge of the song by entering free time. Here, Sophie shares a moment of vulnerability when auto-tuned vocals express, "I was just a lonely girl in the eyes of my inner child, but I could be anything I want, and no matter where I go, you'll always be here in my heart. I don't even have to explain. Just leave me alone now. I can't be held down." Listeners can take the time to follow along with and digest these words when there's no time signature. In my personal interpretation, Sophie is expressing a feeling of gender euphoria. She's found a way to keep in touch with the woman she always was on the inside. I love the idea that one can be free from their physical self and become immaterial to achieve their true self. As someone who identifies as agender, I can have moments where I feel like my identity is invalidated by the things Sophie points out in this song: legs, hair, jeans, and blood. The aspects of Sophie's Immaterial that are indicative of hyperpop were the heavy use of vocal modulation, electric instruments and synths, an industrial beat, and avant-garde elements. These elements, paired with the narrative of gender euphoria, create a unique experience where queerness is centered and can be heard in both the lyrics and musical techniques of the song. I would argue that the elements that comprise hyperpop, when combined, are inherently queer. The use of vocal modulation, electric instruments, an industrial beat, and avant-garde elements are all perceived as outliers in mainstream music. In fact, you could analyze the components with the lens of camp. What is not valued by society can be seen as valuable. To me, combining these uncommon traits of music is not unlike assembling a camp outfit: bold, chaotic, unique, and rebellious. This is what makes hyperpop inherently queer to me. I feel like this is especially noticeable when gender-expansive folks like Dorian Electra utilize the sound of hyperpop to explicitly challenge traditional gender roles and expectations.
I'll say what I mean. I expect the same from you. So you wanna play her off in the parking lot, See you acting tough, but I know you're not. We can take it outside, scuffle in the street light. I just really wanna fight with you. Man to man, hand to hand, one on one, a friend to friend. Are you man enough to soften up? Are you tough enough to open up? Man to man, you gotta let me in. You gotta breathe a bigger man.
In Man to Man, Dorian Electra plays with ambient synths and heavy vocal modulation. The dynamics of the sound increase and the song swells in a moment of rich texture at 40 seconds. I feel like Dorian Electra is asking me directly, are you man enough to soften up? Are you tough enough to open up? This isn't a fight but a challenge. In Dorian Electra's own words, Man to Man is about redefining the values that masculinity traditionally holds in a new, healthier context. Most notably, the use of vocal modulation is extremely purposeful and targeted. Dorian Electra's vocals are pitched to sound androgynous, masculine, and feminine throughout the song. The vocal modulation is so precise and masterful that I could be convinced that multiple people contributed vocals. But the reality is that Dorian Electra created their own choir of gender-fluid voices. Dorian Electra also sets up a call and response with the masculine and feminine features of the voice, and this interplay of masculine and feminine voices complements the discussion of gender and gender roles that is prominent throughout the sound. While the feminine voice asks for moral integrity, the masculine voice asks for de-escalation of violence. As someone who's gender fluid, Dorian Electra is in a unique position to challenge male gender norms and expectations coming from multiple perspectives, and they are able to explicitly portray that nuance in their modulated vocals. The aspects of hyperpop that Dorian Electra utilized the most are vocal modulation and avant-garde elements of gender expression. This hyperpop track could easily be read as queer with or without lyrics. Dorian Electra's use of vocal modulation to create an androgynous sound challenges listeners to meditate on what it means to be gender fluid or non-binary in general. Their open and bold challenge of gender expression in music allows us to see that hyperpop contains elements that queer people gravitate to, and I would argue that this supports the idea that hyperpop is inherently queer. Hyperpop provides LGBTQ+ artists with a new set of tools to be able to center queer narratives in their productions not just lyrically, but also sonically. This can also be seen in Laura Lays' work. She's most known for utilizing pitched-up nightcore style of vocals, and she even explains that portraying her vocals in this way has helped with her experiences with gender dysphoria. With her first single titled Fuck Art Number 1, in parentheses, Sorry Grandpa, I'm Gonna Wear a Dress If I Want to, it's no surprise that Laura Lays has mastery over portraying an avant-garde style in her music. Haunted is a relatively straightforward track with explosive energy, but its message is a lot more cryptic. An 8-beat bit invades the entire song, complementing the electric and robotic sound of Laura Lays' vocals. Laura Lays pitches her vocals to hell and back and adds massive amounts of reverb, allowing her vocals to take more space on the sound. Her voice is exasperated and near illegible in the chorus, an absolute explosion of sound where dynamics are pushed to the loudest. To me, we're witnessing a manic episode filled with high energy and incomprehensible stress. I feel like this song is a perfect example of hyperpop. Chaotic, confusing, avant-garde, and yet inexplicably beautiful in that it's difficult not to vibe with it. I wanted to include this song because of Laura Lays' similar utilization of vocal modulation to achieve her desired gender expression. This is extremely similar to what Dorian Electra does with androgynous sound. Instead of an androgynous sound, Laura Lays flavors high-pitched nightcore vocals to achieve a more feminine sound. I felt like this was another great example of hyperpop providing LGBTQ+ artists with a new arsenal of tools to center queerness. In conclusion, hyperpop is characterized by an avant-garde electronic sound, sometimes accompanied with industrial elements that can be achieved through synths, unique or industrial beats, and shimmering and robotic vocal modulation. As a genre, hyperpop provides LGBTQ+ artists with new tools to better convey a narrative of queerness, while also being itself inherently queer due to its camp composition of unique and refreshing elements uncommon in mainstream music.